Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
The show you are listening to was recorded some years ago. Therefore, please disregard any days or dates that may not be applicable to today's time. The modern state of Israel is 68 years old. And on these 2 days that we celebrate, Memorial Day and Independence Day, I'm going to be sharing with you a very, very special story about people who fought for Israel's independence, people who fought for Israel's survival after we got our independence. Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day for Israel's fallen soldiers and victims of terrorism, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day and 68th birthday. We're concentrating on those who fought for the State of Israel to give it its birthday after 2,000 years. The Jewish people finally had a state. But even winning the War of Independence, and even with the agreement of the United Nations and a vote that Israel should be a state here in the land of Israel, but the Arabs rejected it and went to war against us, we've still been fighting these wars throughout the years from 1948, and then again in 1956, 1967, 1973, and wars after that as well in Lebanon in the 1980s, and still here in the years of the 2000s with the Hamas in Gaza, wars there as well. Israel is constantly fighting for its survival. So I want to take this time to be able to share some stories of some heroes and survivors who have fought for the State of Israel. I'm going to be reading from a book called Sane In Damascus. It's written by Amnon Sharon, and I'm going to be playing an interview that I did with him, and he's going to talk about how when he fought in the Yom Kippur War of 1973, how he and his unit, his company, were attacked by the Syrians. They were vastly outnumbered in tanks by the Syrians as well, and they were hit by a Syrian shell. He was wounded. When he woke up on the battlefield, he was surrounded by Syrian soldiers and taken in as a prisoner of war, facing the torture, the bitter cold, the horrible conditions, the lack of food. How he survived is inspiring, and he's going to be sharing all of that in this interview that I did with him. You're listening to the Tamar Yonah Show here at Israel News Talk Radio. This is a special show in order to commemorate Israel's Memorial Day and also its Independence Day, its birthday. I'm going to be sharing with you now an interview that I did, which captures the life of an Israeli man who was wounded in the 1973 Yom Kippur War and was then taken prisoner by the Syrians. I'm holding in my hands right now a book that is by Geffen Publishing House. You can go find the book on israelbooks.com. It's called Sane in Damascus, and it's the story of my guest coming up now, Amnon Sharon, who was a prisoner of war during the Yom Kippur War, and he was held by the Syrians, and he talks about the time as being a prisoner, how he was treated, the tortures that they went through, where they housed the prisoners. Exactly, you live the experience with him, and afterwards he talks about how he came home to Israel and his adjusting here, and everyone else as well. He talks about other people as well in his book. And I want to welcome to the show right now Amnon Sharon. Welcome.
Hello.
Shalom, Amnon.
Shalom, shalom.
So, Amnon, give our listeners a background of how you were caught and taken as a prisoner of war.
Okay. On 1973, it was Saturday, Yom Shabbat, Yom Kippur. I was called to the war. I was a commander of an armor company, and it was a reserve company. and we went to the Golan Heights with 7 tanks, only 7 tanks. We arrived to the middle of the Golan Heights near Nafach, and we went to a very difficult battle. We were 7 tanks against almost 100 Syrian tanks.
So 7 Israeli tanks against approximately 100 Syrian tanks.
Yes.
Wow.
It was very, very difficult battle. At the end, all my company was destroyed by the Syrian. 5 of my soldiers were killed. Most of the other soldiers was wounded, and I myself was wounded and was captured by the Syrian.
How are you wounded?
Please?
How were you wounded?
From the explosive of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
I got a Syrian shell, and the tank was burning, and I jumped out. All my body was wounded, and I lie on the ground, and early in the morning I wake up, and I understood that I'm wounded, and suddenly I saw Syrian soldiers standing by me. He looked at me, I looked at him, and he put his hands up. I was lying on the ground, wounded, without a gun, and all over the Syrian was there with tanks, and the Syrian soldiers stood and his hands up.
Like he was surrendering to you?
Yes.
How is that he's on his feet and you're wounded lying there? And
I don't know what was in his mind, but and it's a very sensitive situation because I didn't know even one word in Arabic,
mm-hmm.
and I thought that all the other Syrians can see these soldiers with his hands up, and they will shoot both of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that I will assign him to lie by me, and then I will decide what to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
But he understood that I'm wounded, and he put his hands down, took his gun, and called his friends, and in the evening, it was Sunday morning, but in the evening I was in Damascus. 5 months I was alone in a small cell, cold, dark. They tortured me, they hit and beat and kicked and do everything.
When they interrogated you, when they asked you questions about information, did they
yes,
speak to you in
asked
Hebrew?
for information, but as I told you before, I was a reserve soldier.
A reservist, yes.
Officer,
mm-hmm.
and I really didn't know what they asked to do, what they asked to know.
What language did they speak to you in if you didn't understand Arabic?
The investigator spoke Arabic, and there was a man that translated to Hebrew.
Uh-huh. And can you tell us what kind of tortures they did?
It's very difficult for me to speak about it. It's written in the book.
Yes.
But they use instruments from the Inquisition, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I was blooding all the time. My body was cut to small pieces. But, and as you know, the armor soldiers, we are not getting any preparation to be prisoner of war. They told us that we can kill, we can wounded, we can burn in the tanks, but not be P.O.W. in that time. So the pilots and the special units, they are getting special training to be P.O.W. But in the armor, we don't have any training to this.
Now, when you were being held by the Syrians, you were held in solitary confinement for approximately 5 months, you said. Did you think that you were the only Israeli that was caught? And did you think that is somebody trying to get me home? Does my wife, my family know? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I want to tell you that I started to build a method surviving. First of all, I am not a religious till today, but I made a prayer, and 3 times a day I was praying that prayer till today. But there, in Syria, I was only with underwear, and it was very cold in that time. But when I finished my prayer, I feel that a lot of warmth cover my body, and the inside voice say, keep on, because God with you. And I believe that God was with me all the time when I was there. After the heavy investigations, they put me back in the cell, in the small cell. I was broken bones and full of blood. I started to dreams when I was awake, not when I was
You were hallucinating,
sleeping.
yes.
The first dream was that I met 3 of the Red Cross men, and they told me in the dream that there was a war with Egypt, Syria, and Israel, and now started the negotiation with Mitzrayim between Israel
Egypt.
to make exchange. And they told me that it's finished, and now starting the negotiation with the Syrian. It's full of stress, it's going to be finished and then it's explode like we see with Gilad Shalit now. And at the dream, they told me, you will be back in Israel on the June 8th. I dreamed it in November, and I so believed in that date. It was clear to me that on June 8th I will be at home. In one of the investigations, they asked me, what is Merkava? Do you know what is Merkava?
Yes, it's a tank.
Yeah, but in that time, I didn't know what is Merkava.
Oh, but you were in the tank unit.
Yeah, but in that time in Syria, I didn't know what is this.
Okay, so they were seen to... Okay,
It was not exist in that time.
Right.
Maybe only the name.
Yes,
and,
I forget. We're talking
and
about the
maybe
73
in
war.
the regular army they know about it.
Yes.
I really didn't know. I didn't want to be a hero and to hide it. I didn't know what is Merkava. And it was not in a conversation like you and me are doing now.
Yes.
It was in very aggressive and massive investigation. And at the end, I told them, once we have chariot with horses and, like in the Egypt chariot.
Yes.
Today we don't use it, and this joke almost cost my life. Because the investigator signed to one of the soldiers,
yes.
And he ran to me with a knife and put it in my back. When I wake up...
He stabbed you?
What?
He stabbed you in your back?
Yes.
Wow.
He put the knife in my back.
We're going to pause here and take a break. We'll be right back.
The show you are listening to was recorded some years ago. Therefore, please disregard any days or dates that may not be applicable to today's time.
As Israel observes and celebrates both its Memorial Day and its Independence Day, Israel's 68th birthday, we continue now with focusing on people who fought for the independence of Israel and for the survival of Israel after we got our independence. And we're talking with Amnon Sharon. He was a POW caught by the Syrians in the Yom Kippur 1973 war. He stabbed you in your back?
Yes,
Wow.
he put the knife in my back.
Uh-huh.
And when I wake up from my faint, I found myself in the cell,
Yes.
in my cell.
Yes.
And medicine soldiers make clamot, you know what I mean, on my back to close
The wound. Yes.
the open
wound. Yes.
skin. And one that I couldn't see him asked me in Hebrew, don't you know that Israel have a new tank, Merkava? And I told him and I shouted to him, no, we have no Merkava. And when they closed the door, I started to dream that I'm not captain as I was in that time. I'm colonel. And I stood in a hill on the Negev, a hill that we make our training. And while I was a commander of chariots, of Merkavot, and my Merkava was matchbox with cigarette like a barrel, you know. And I took 100 matchboxes through Be'er Sheva and Tel Aviv and Haifa, and I captured back all the country. After 4 months, they gave me a mattress. It was dirty mattress, stink.
So before that, you were sleeping on a cold cement floor.
Yes,
in
on
your
the floor,
underwear.
on the cement floor.
In your underwear, right?
Yes. And to remind you, it was October, November, December. There was snow outside.
Wow.
It was very cold. And after 4 months, they gave me the mattress. I remember that I lie on the mattress and I shouted, Sheraton, Hilton, 5 stars. I can live here now almost a year. And then I got depression. If they gave the mattress, maybe it will be a year. And you know, the mood are high and down.
Yes.
And after a few hours, the mattress was not comfortable. And I dream, a big dream, that I'm a manufacturer of beds and mattresses, and I work very hard from the morning till the evening, trucks, workers. I'm without pencil and paper, make calculation in my head, how much I have to pay for the materials, how much I have to eat, and the time run quickly in that time.
So this is
after 5 months, they took me and put me together with all the officers. We were on a big room, 25 officers, 21 pilots, 2 from the armor, a doctor from the Hermon, and the intelligence officer from the Hermon. We were 25, and we make a community, you know,
so this
an
was
Israeli
the first time.
territoria.
This was the first time that you realized that you weren't alone, and now you were able to meet other prisoners from Israel.
Yes. And everyone tell his story to the other. And one of the pilots say, "Let's do Toto." You know what is Toto?
It's like a lottery, like
a lottery. Everyone will tell when we come back to Israel, when we will be back in Israel, and the man that will be closer will win. And when we will be in Israel, we will go to famous restaurant because we was very starving there. And the man that will be closer to the day will not pay. And one say 5 years, the other 3 years. When my turn come, what I said?
You said June 8th.
June 8th. There was a silence. And one of the pilots that sat by me say, well, what is June 8th? And as you know, the pilots, maybe even today, but in that time, the pilots was the deputy of God. They was the elite of the elite, the best of the best.
Right. They were treated like gods, too. Yes.
Yeah, and I was ashamed to say that I dream it. They will say, nach, dreams. You know? I say 8th of June. And after some moments, one of the pilots say, you know, I was captured on December. A month before, in November, the Egypt made exchange of prisoner of war. As he said it, I jumped and I say, I know it. So they told me, how do you know it? You are here. And I say, you know, in Hebrew we say, Ala Chaim ve'ala Mavet.
Yes.
I will tell them all my dream. And at the end, the pilot near to me say, okay, Yosef, let's see what will happen. So we were there 3 months together. When I left my wife at the beginning of the war, she was 3 months pregnant. And there, in the third visit of the Red Cross, they told me, Mazal Tov, you have a new son.
Wow.
Your son was born. I called him Dror because Dror in Hebrew is freedom.
Yes.
And maybe it's telepathic, maybe Bella thought the same. She called him Dror.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
I don't remember. I read the book a long time ago. I just want to remind everybody, we only have another minute left to the interview. And we're speaking with Colonel Amnon Sharon. He was captured by the Syrians in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And he's telling us about his book, Sane In Damascus, and about his time being a prisoner of war. I don't want you to give away how you were able to get back to Israel, because I want people to get this book, because I want them to understand the sacrifices that our IDF makes, that our people that go into fight our wars. So just quickly tell us, what do you want people to get out of this day, knowing what you've been through, what you sacrificed, what your friends and your comrades in the army sacrifice as well? Because so many people are thinking, let's just get this over with and go out and barbecue the next day on Yom Ha'atzmaut, on Israel Independence Day. So knowing what you went through, what message do you want people to take away from Yom HaZikaron, from Memorial Day?
Yom HaZikaron, it's a special day. We have to remember all our friends, and all the people have to remember that the soldiers that were killed, they were killed that all together, all the other people here, will live in peace, in safety, and they were killed not for nothing, if you know what I mean.
Yes, of course. So we should say some prayers, and I really want to encourage everyone to get a hold of your book. It's called Sane In Damascus by Amnon Sharon, and you can get that at israelbooks.com. It's published by Geffen. And Amnon Sharon, I am so glad that you were able to make it home to us here and to teach us this lesson, that we really need to appreciate the sacrifices of everyone who fell in battle, who was injured, who was taken as a prisoner of war. And thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you, and Chag Sameach in Yom HaAtzmaut.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, we're going to end that recording now, but I just want to read to you something here that's in his book if you want to order it, just to get a taste of what he talks about here. He says, every half hour they came in and they beat me, and as I contorted on the floor, blood flowed everywhere. I screamed in pain, and here as well I could hear the same shouts and beatings from the other cells, with no relief in sight. In the evening, they again covered my face with a black sack and dragged me to the interrogation room. From what I could hear and make out, I understood that I was near a table with about 5 men sitting around it. They stood me in the middle of the room, barefoot and wearing only my underwear. Behind me and on both sides of me stood guards holding whips, daggers, knives, and other tools of devastation. From the ceiling dangled a thick rope with an automobile tire tied to the end of it, like the swings that monkeys play on. "What's your name, rank, and to which unit do you belong?" one of them asked me. I paused for a moment, uncomprehending, but a painful strike on my shoulder pushed me back to reality. "I'm Captain Amnon Sharon, an armor officer in the reserves," I said shortly. Activity began around me, but I could see nothing. Suddenly, someone threw me in the air, jammed me into the tire, dangling from the ceiling, and whirled it around while the soldiers stood on all sides and beat me with iron rods. My head spun dizzily, and I could see nothing. I could only feel the blood flowing from my wounds. We'll be right back.
The show you are listening to was recorded some years ago. Therefore, please disregard any days or dates that may not be applicable to today's time. We hope you enjoy the program.
Well, this is the last segment, and we are doing the show in honor of Memorial Day here in Israel, and followed by Israel's Independence Day, 68 years, her birthday. I want to share with you one more story about a hero who came from America and joined the army, joined the IDF here in order to protect the state of Israel. His name, Michael Levin. And this story is from a book by the name A Voice Called: Stories of Jewish Heroism by Yossi Katz. In February 2001, Michael came to Israel for 2 months to study the 4,000-year history of the Jewish people at the Alexander Muss High School in Israel. While in Israel, Michael expressed his desire to make Aliyah, move to Israel, and become an Israeli citizen, and serve in Sahal, in the Israel Defense Forces. Michael proved to be an outstanding student and was especially moved by the stories of Jewish heroes like Judah the Maccabee, Yehuda HaMaccabee, Shimon Bar Kokhba, Rabbi Akiva, Chana Senesh, Eli Cohen, Avigdor Kahalani, and Yonatan Yoni Netanyahu. The most moving moment for Michael in school here was on the last day of the program when his class visited the grave of Yoni Netanyahu, who was the hero of the 1976 Entebbe rescue mission. His grave was at Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. Yoni Netanyahu is the older brother of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Michael looked up to Yoni as a role model and a hero, and was touched by Yoni's words from a 1975 letter. He wrote, "By past, I mean not only my own past, but the way in which I see myself as an integral part, a link in the chain of our existence and Israel's independence." Unquote. Like Yoni, Michael also saw himself as a link in the chain of Jewish history and felt an obligation to defend his people. He dreamed of serving in the Israeli Defense Forces. After graduating high school, Michael attended Nativ, USY's year-long course in Israel, and in his Nativ yearbook wrote the words that would become his motto, quote, "You can't fulfill your dreams unless you dare risk it all." Michael was neither a daredevil nor a gambling man. He was a sweet, funny, humble, kind, loving human being who relished life and lived it to the fullest. He simply believed that life wasn't worth living unless there was some ideal you loved so much that you'd be willing to sacrifice your life for it. For Michael, that ideal was Israel. In 2003, Michael made Aliyah to Israel and began studying Hebrew at an ulpan, an intensive course in speaking Hebrew, on Kibbutz Yavne. Like all Israelis, Michael was drafted into the Israeli Defense Forces and reported to the Army Induction Center at Tel HaShomer. As he was being processed, the officer in charge noticed his papers had not been finalized due to his new status in the country. The officer told him that he couldn't be drafted at this time. Undeterred, Michael went outside the Army Induction Center and climbed up a trash dumpster, sneaking into the second floor of the building. When the officer discovered him, he hollered at Michael and said, "No one can get through the front door here without papers." To which Michael smiled and replied, "What makes you think I came through the front door?" The officer pulled some strings and arranged for Michael to be processed as an Israeli soldier. He later remarked, "I've been here at the Army Induction Center for 20 years. Some kids don't want to be here and look for ways to get out. But Michael was the first kid I ever met who broke in to be inducted into Tzahal, the IDF. Once in Tzahal, Michael volunteered for the IDF's finest combat unit, the Red Beret paratroopers. During his basic training, Michael learned to parachute. Small in size, 5'6", and weighing only 118 pounds, Michael was blown off course on his first jump. Afterwards, his officers had to tie weights to his parachute to keep him from drifting. Despite his small size, Mike was a fierce fighter with a lion's heart. At the end of their basic training, the paratroopers go on a 90-kilometer or 55-mile march to Jerusalem, where they receive their Red Berets at Ammunition Hill, a famous battle site for the 1967 Six-Day War. In 2001, while still at school, Michael had learned about the heroism of the paratroops in that battle from one of the surviving veterans who spoke to his class. Now he was receiving his Red Beret on that hallowed ground. Michael described that day as one of the happiest in his life. Mike was not only a brave soldier, but he remained a loving son and brother. He once said, quote, "I'm not worried about dying. I'm just worried about what it would do to my family." Michael held a special status in Tzahal called Chayal Boded, given to lone Israeli soldiers whose parents do not live in the country. Military service is tough enough for most young Israelis, but they are comforted knowing that they will soon return home on their Shabbat leaves to a warm and loving family. Michael had none in Israel, making his service that much tougher. Some of Michael's friends back in the States were worried about Michael being in an elite combat unit of the Israeli army. But Michael responded philosophically to them. He said, quote, "I'm doing exactly what I want to do and going exactly where I want to be. And if God should decide to call me home, I'm fine with that." On a visit back to Philadelphia, Michael told his parents that if anything ever happened to him, he wanted to be buried on Mount Herzl in Jerusalem. That's the military cemetery. On July 12, 2006, the Lebanese terrorist organization Hezbollah attacked Israel and kidnapped 2 Israeli soldiers, Ehud Goldwasser and Eldad Regev. The Hezbollah, dedicated to Israel's destruction and armed by Iran, began shelling Israel's northern cities. Michael heard that his unit was sent into battle, and he promptly told his family that he had to cut his visit short to rejoin his comrades in arms. He rushed back to Israel and rejoined his unit, the 890th Battalion of the Paratroopers Brigade, then fighting inside Lebanon. Michael's unit was on a mission in the Lebanese village of Eta al-Sha'ab, a Hezbollah stronghold, when they came under heavy missile and gunfire. Held up in a house, Michael fought bravely, but on August 1st, 2006, he was tragically killed by a Hezbollah sniper. His fellow soldier and friend, Shlomi Singer, described Michael's last moments. He said, "I heard a round of gunfire and saw Michael lying on his stomach. I knew in my heart he was dead. I lifted him to one of the houses where I tried to revive him, but there was no chance. I said quietly in English, 'I love you, Michael, and I'm so sorry.' He was wearing a big green kippah, and before we went into Lebanon, I put his kippah on my head and said the Shema, praying that we all come back safely. After Michael was killed, we placed his body on a stretcher and carried him for several kilometers between the cliffs and rocks to bring his body to safety. It was the final honor and respect that we could give him." Michael's family was notified in Philadelphia of his death in battle, and they immediately flew to Israel for his funeral. One of their biggest worries was whether they'd be able to find a minyan, a quorum of 10 men necessary for communal prayer, for the ceremony, as they had no family in the country. They arrived at Ben Gurion Airport on August 3rd, 2006, and drove right from the airport to the National Military Cemetery on Mount Herzl. When the car arrived at the cemetery, the Levins saw thousands of people gathered there. Michael's father was confused by the large crowd and thought there were 10 or 15 other funerals taking place at the same time. The soldiers escorting the family told them that Michael's was the only funeral being held at this time. And all the thousands of people in attendance, most of whom had not known Michael, were there to honor their fallen son. Immersed in their shock and grief, but embraced by a loving and grateful nation, the Levins family buried their son on the hills of Jerusalem, the city he loved with all his heart, just a few yards away from the grave of his hero, Yoni Netanyahu. This Memorial Day, let us remember those who have fallen in service for the Jewish people to protect us in our homeland, Israel. Let us remember the victims of Arab terror who were killed here only because they were Jews living in their home, Israel. Let us pray for their souls, pray for their families and loved ones as we remember those on Remembrance Day for the fallen soldiers of Israel and victims of terrorism. And happy birthday to Israel on her 68 years of independence. You've been listening to the Tamar Yonah Show. Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.